What if there was a map, not of the world around you, but of you? Your patterns, your gifts, the moments of your life where everything shifted, and even the weeks when things flow more easily than others. What if that map was available to you since the moment you were born? Welcome back to Exploring Ways to Wellness. I'm Sarah Goreb, and this week I'm joined by the wonderful Soph Newman. She's a psychotherapist, astrologer, and someone who describes everything she does as science and soul, which honestly already makes me feel like this conversation is going to be a good one. Now, I'll be upfront. I went into this thinking I knew a bit about astrology. I'm an Aquarius, and sometimes I read horoscopes. Job done. So very gently dismantled that in about 2 minutes. In this episode, we talk about why horoscopes can actually be quite misleading and what understanding your full birth chart opens up instead. How Soph uses astrology not to predict the future, but as what she calls a map of opportunities, knowing when to rest, when to act, and when the planets are working in your favour. This fascinating idea that every country has its own birth chart and how some astrologers are mapping global events before they even happen. Why the moon journal I've been using might be doing more than I realised. And what the word sonder has to do with compassion, astrology, and being a little bit less impatient with your partner. I actually ended up booking a session with Soph before we even recorded this, which probably tells you everything you need to know about my interest in it. So, let's get to it. Welcome back to Exploring Ways to Wellness. I'm thrilled this week to have Soph Newman with me. And Soph is going to talk to us about astrology. I thought I knew quite a bit because I knew that I'm an Aquarius. But it wasn't even until I started speaking to Soph that I found out that was a sun sign. And there is a lot more to this than just your horoscopes. So thank you so much, Soph, for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Can we just start with, I touched on there, I really don't know very much about astrology, although I'm aware that it's to do with the placement of moons, planets, that kind of thing. To somebody who doesn't know very much and just reads horoscopes, how would you introduce people to it?
Yeah, and this is the thing, isn't it? I think most people know what we'd call star sign, but that is your sun sign. So the moment we are born, it's almost like it's a snapshot of, where all the planets were in the sky, and that creates our birth chart. And our sun, like yours in Aquarius, is just one of the planets and the placements that we can have. So when we're looking at our horoscopes and there's only 12 there's so many more layers to it, because someone can have an Aquarius sun, but they might have, for example, their moon might fall in Cancer, their Jupiter might fall in Gemini. So when we're born, these planets give us, the energy that we carry through our life. And what I find so exciting about astrology is, it's not just that snapshot in our natal chart gives us our kind of personality traits and how we handle emotion and how we approach the world. Obviously, the planets continue to move throughout our whole life. And as they move, they activate things within our birth chart. So this is why. And I think most people, even if they aren't into astrology, will be able to relate to feeling things around a full moon. And actually, some full moons, you might be like, what the hell is going on? And then others, you don't even notice it's a full moon. And that's because it's like activating different things in your personal birth chart.
I find that really interesting because, as you touched on there is a tendency, I find, in that if somebody's having a bad day, everyone sort of piles on and says, oh, well, there's some things in retrograde, or there's a full moon, or something's going on like this. But actually, it sounds like it's a more personal thing. It wouldn't necessarily affect everybody in the same way because it depends on what your signs are to begin with.
Absolutely. So if, for example, the most recent full moon that we had on Friday, the Sagittarius ones, if you have strong Sagittarius placements in your chart, so you have your sun and moon, kind of any of the personal planets, which kind of like Venus and Mars. So Venus, wherever Venus falls in our chart, Venus is the planet of like our love and our values, and Mars is our like action and drive. So if we have those kind of planets in Sagittarius, or we have any other planets chatting or talking with Sagittarius, we're going to feel that differently to maybe someone who hasn't. And also each zodiac falls into a different house. So our houses are our life areas. So one of the houses examples of the 10th house is like our house of career, and work, and the 6th house is like the house of our daily routine. 7th is relationships. So depending on what house area it falls in, you might also notice that differently. If you're feeling that, if you've got a full moon in your 6th house, that's our daily routine. We're going to feel that differently to someone who's maybe got that in their house of relationships, and they might feel that more, that their partner's really pissing them off that day, whereas the person who has it in their daily chart might just feel like, those days when everything just feels like hard work. So it really feels different for everyone, and that's why horoscopes can be just so misleading, because there's just so many more layers to it. And that's what I love to, because I never blame the planets. So I like will never be like, oh, I'm having a bad day because this is happening, or the planets don't cause things to happen. It's just that our energy that it affects. But sometimes I absolutely love, if one of my clients is having a rubbish day, I'll be like, let's look at your chart, and usually it's Mars doing something in there, or Saturn's up to something again. But usually it's like a mirror, you can see it reflected back, and I adore that.
Yeah, that's lovely, because it gives a reason for things sometimes that you can't usually give a reason for. We do search for that, don't we? We're like, well, why me?
Yeah, and I think anything, whatever that looks like, whether that's astrology, whatever that might be, anything that can bring us a little bit of self-compassion and a bit of self-kindness, I'm here for. So if that means that you can go, oh God, it's the full moon, that's why I'm feeling a bit grumpy, and then you can meet yourself with a bit more compassion, I'm here for it.
Yeah. And I guess it gives you that sort of positivity going forward as well, because it as you said, the moon, the stars, it's all constantly moving. So it doesn't mean that's the way you're going to be forever. It gives you that optimism, if you like. Things will move through this, and then there'll be something else on the other side.
Yeah, absolutely. It really is. You can look at it and go, this too shall pass type, because I think what happens is when people are having a wobbly day or whatever, we can really get in our own heads and feel like this is just how we're going to feel from now on. But actually, when we know, give it a couple of days and I'll be feeling good again, it can give you that optimism, hope, which hope is my favorite word in the whole wide world, by the way. So, and I think when we don't have that optimism and hope, that's when we can kind of feel ourselves in a hole. So I think if you look at your chart and you can see, okay, this is going to pass in a couple of days. And then how can I use what I have got, the positive aspects that I have got? Okay, my chart's telling me that I need to rest, or my chart's saying that maybe I need to get out in nature, and use that side of it as well.
Yeah. And I think another point I want to touch on there that's linked to what you just said is that sometimes in wellness, we can get a bit caught up in just the rest side. But as you were saying, there's all these houses, and some of them actually could be very productive, presumably, and be a good time for action.
Absolutely. And I always call an astrology our map of opportunities. So when we're really using our chart, we know when to rest, and actually for some people it gives them permission to rest without guilt. So I think that's really, I'm here for that. But actually there's so much in our chart that will tell us this is a really good time to get out and about, to be sociable. Because I'm very much like, some days I'll go out in a social situation and I'll be like, oh, get me home now. And then other days I'll go out and I'll love it. And I've noticed a pattern in that with what's happening in my chart. So there are times that would be better for us to launch stuff in our business, or, you know, to talk about what we're doing, or to go networking, because the planets are kind of working in our favor. And that's what, you know, my kind of passion is about. It's not just helping people understand their birth chart, but how can we use it in our everyday life?
Yeah, yeah. And so how on earth did you come across all of this? Is this something that was a childhood passion that you've ended up turning into more of a full-time activity, or is
So
it
of
more
all,
recent?
so yeah, I always used to read the horoscope. So like I'd go to toilet at home, and then my mum's magazine would be on the floor in the bath. She'd been in the bathroom, her Heat magazine or whatever it would be, and I would pick it up and I would read my horoscope in there, even at 9, and it would be like, Leo is going to meet their love of their life on Tuesday, and I'd be like, yes,
I love it.
yeah. And that's all I knew for a long time. And I think it was about when I was about 22, I had like my full birth chart done. And I remember telling people about it, and everyone was like, oh God, you know, we're nonsense and whatever. So it's something I used to kind of not do in secret, I guess, but I kind of would look into every now and again, and didn't really dive into it much more. But how it really came about and I made it part of my business was in 2021, my daughter was diagnosed with leukemia, and
Oh, sorry.
she had 3 years of chemo. And during that time, as you can imagine, I went through a real kind of awakening to sugar. Life is really, really short. Life is so precious. I need to change how I'm living it, and I need to make the most of it. And prior to that, I'd been in retail management, and I actually loved my job. I loved meeting people. I loved the customers. I absolutely, every store that I loved in, I loved my team. But I wasn't coming home feeling like fulfilled, I don't think. You know, I don't think I was feeling like, oh, I made a difference today. That was so when Callie was going through her chemo, I retrained as a psychotherapist. And again, that's something that I'd always wanted to do, was to like help people. But I never thought I was clever enough and stuff. But I was like, you know what, just go for it. Life is really too short. And then I started realizing that actually healing to me had to happen on more than one layer. It had to happen on more than just our mind, which is what the psychotherapy was doing. And it gave me some amazing skills and knowledge to understand the human brain and things. But for me, there had to be a deeper level, which was like bringing in that spirituality. And I remember the craziest thing, and people wouldn't believe me if I told them this, but when I looked at my chart for the day my daughter was diagnosed with cancer, so it's the 4th September 2021, I had a transit in there. So what happened was Pluto, which is the planet of real transformation, Uranus, which is the planet of, they literally call it the rug being swept from under your feet. It is, you know, sudden shocks is one of the things that they say with Uranus. So we had Pluto, the planet of transformation, and Uranus making a pattern with my moon, which is my emotions. And my moon is Cancer. So my moon is all about family, motherhood, nurture. And it was in the house of family. So so when you actually think about the fact that we had all of those planets coming together, and the interesting thing is that is a once in a life transit. It would never happen again that they would hit that formation.
Okay.
And it happened to the day. No, I'm not saying that the planets cause her cancer, but what I'm saying is when I saw that and I saw how it was reflected so perfectly, that's when I started not just taking the birth chart stuff seriously and helping people understand their birth chart, but helping them understand how this is so reflected in our common life too. But how can we use that to our advantage?
Yeah. And so from there, Have you found that it's something that you use as a sort of daily check, or do you look at it your annual?
So have a couple of people that I write it's called this like Soph's Cosmic Hotline. So I will write for them every week what is happening for them coming
Okay.
up, so they can kind of like know what's going on for their week. So when I'm doing that on a Sunday evening, I'll do my own. So I'll sit and I'll look what is coming up for the week. There's some astrologers that will literally only do things if the planets are in their favor, and I don't let it control me like that. If I want to go somewhere and the planets are saying, oh, you're not going to be at your best that day, I'll still go. But I will look and see, okay, maybe Thursday won't be the best day for me to go here. And Thursday evening, I'll sit and I'll do kind of more written work because I'm not going to have that much energy. So I do like roughly plan my week around what's going to happen. And then, yeah, always look at it on a bigger scale with the month and then the year as well, because of course, all the planets move at different times. So the planets kind of, the sun, Mercury, Mars, they all move quite quickly, but the others tend to move more slower, and they're going to affect us monthly. And then we have the planets that I just spoke about, like Pluto and Uranus, they move very slowly. So they're what's called generational planets because they tend to affect the collective more than they do personally. So although they hit all of our charts in different places, does that make sense? So you kind of look at it from a bigger, and then how does this affect me every day?
Yeah. Can you sort of see those big ones affecting us as society
Absolutely.
with
Yeah.
national
So
and global things that are going
yeah.
on?
So there's a type of astrology called mundane astrology, which it literally focuses on using astrology to talk about what's going on globally, because each country has their own birth chart, depending on when they would, like America, it was like their, Declaration Day, for example. And there's some astrologers that are able to see, let's say, for example, the conflict in Iran. People were talking about that before it happened because they could see it in Iran and the US's chart. So there's some astrologers out there that can really look at the collective and how it's going to affect us. But even kind of, just on a personal level, I can see it in terms of kind of recently Uranus moved into Gemini. Gemini is the sign of communication, of technology, and Uranus is kind of like what I said earlier, breakthroughs. Gemini also rules AI, and you can see that since that's happened, since Uranus has moved into there, the absolute boom in AI has been insane. So even without me looking at it on the level of, political stuff, you can see those changes happen within the collective.
That's fascinating, isn't
Yeah.
it?
Yeah. And a really amazing podcast to listen to if you are interested in the world one is literally called the Astrology Podcast. It's done by Chris Brennan. And what he does is he will talk about the month, what's coming up for the month and what he thinks it means for us as a collective, the whole world. But then at the beginning of the podcast, he will go through all the news stories, and he will talk about the astrology of them. So if you listen to 1 month and you listen to, say, at the moment, June's has just come out, and you listen to how he's going to talk about what he thinks is going to happen for June, and then you listen to the one at the next month, you can see what he's done with how it matches up, and it is fascinating.
Wow, I'll definitely have to have a listen to that, because
Yeah.
that sounds really interesting. And it also links into, personally, and a lot of people, they like to be able to sort of test things and see, well, does this make a difference? And so to be able to have that sort of check back, I guess it builds your trust in the fact that it's a system that genuinely is valuable to you on a daily or a monthly basis. To understand the world by the sounds of it, as well as yourself.
Yeah, and I'm still, even though, I would say I am more spiritual than the average person. Like, I believe we have soul contracts. I actually believe that our soul picked our birth chart to give us that map of opportunities. But I still need logic. I still have that logical part of my brain that is like, yeah, but does it? So I think like seeing and listening and reading about those kind of things, where it's, there's he will talk about, if a transit's coming up, for example, he will talk about in history last time that happened, and it might be, oh, this public figure died during that time, and or the Berlin Wall came down. So he'll also relate it back to moments in history where we've had those similar transits, what he thinks that will mean for the future. But yeah, I find that really helpful for that, I guess, that little skeptic part of my brain that's always there, because natural. I need that. Yes, yeah. I need that, which is why I call everything that I do science and soul. I have the science part of the psychotherapy and understand how the brain works, but then I have that like soulful part as well. Like, what is our soul here for?
Yeah. And I guess you've been doing it for so long that you've got so many now examples of where it's been reinforced that, this is, what I thought would happen has happened. Or,
and that's why I love it when, the forecasts that I do for people weekly, quite often they'll come message me at the end of the week and just say like, this happened. And I love hearing that feedback from people, because I think that's the best way for me to learn. Is I can look at a chart and I can interpret it, but I love hearing how it plays out in real life, because then next time when I see that pattern for someone, I can then remember, oh yes, for that person, this happened. And then I can use it, because ultimately my main goal with everything I do would be to teach people how to use it for themselves and not have to rely on an astrologer or anything, because we all come in with our own bias. But if you know how to read your chart for yourself, you're going to then be able to make that relevant for everything that's going on for you at that time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely. I guess there's two things there. One is the sort of the cause and effect argument. I guess if you're saying certain things are going to happen, then it's a bit like manifestation in a way, in that you could say, well, then your attention ends up being directed in that way, and you might put more energy into that sort of thing. But for what you've said, actually, it doesn't always play out exactly that way, and that can help you readjust. Like sometimes you could have assumed that this means this, but actually it could mean something slightly different that still fits, but wasn't quite what you were.
Yeah. And I think that's, again, why I love having the feedback, because I think, the chart could be saying, I don't know, you're going to have this really big, this is a really great week for career. And then the person will come back and say, well, actually, I didn't get any new clients this week, so that bit didn't fit for me. But actually, when you carry on speaking to them, they didn't have any new clients, but they've gone networking and they've met someone who they're potentially going to collaborate with. So it isn't always like as black and white as that, but usually, like you said, there can be a way that it does fit in, which is why I think being able to understand it for ourselves and know our current situation is the best way to do it.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to, but it sounds so complicated. I have to admit, like there's just so many layers to it. But I guess that's when you're trying to understand everything for everyone. I guess when you know your own birth chart and take that as a starting point, does it become simpler?
Absolutely, because then you would be just kind of understanding, right, okay, I have Taurus. What does Taurus mean? I have my Mars there. What does Mars? And it's in this house. And you kind of can then get a better, you wouldn't have to worry about, maybe for now, until maybe you had a transit, you wouldn't worry what's happening in Leo, for example. But I mean, this is even just reading someone's birth chart and understanding, what's going on for them at the moment is just surface level. There is so much more to it, where we have like chart rulers and chart depositors and prenatal eclipses. It just goes.
Oh my gosh, it sounds never ending.
Yeah, but that's what I love. Like, because there's you're learning all the time, and because there are for example, transits and things that happen that haven't happened for 80, 90 years, we're like, well, what does that look like now in 2026? So you're still learning, because obviously that's going to look very different to what it did 100 years ago when they didn't have the tech and the things that we have. So it's always learning. And it's funny because I hated learning at school. Like, I really disliked school. But when it's now, I absolutely love learning because it's something that lights me up.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds amazing. And where do you learn this stuff from? I mean, is it pulling on sort of a lot of the things that we talk about are pulling on ancient wisdom, or is it sort of interpreted by, is there an association that
Yeah,
gives
I
this
mean, people have
information?
been using the planets for thousands and thousands of years. I mean, they've found like evidence like prescribed in kind of like tablets and stuff that people, so it's probably one of the oldest kind of, what would we call it, modalities, I guess, that there is. And then over the years, people have come in and interpreted it different. And there's so many different ways that people can learn. I've done courses with astrologers, but for me, I would say for anyone out there who wanted to know more, YouTube is a really amazing place to start for people, to keep it like really basic, because I've done hundreds and hours of courses that cost a lot of money, but actually there is a lot of value in just picking up. I mean, I've got hundreds of books that I can recommend for good starting points that we can put in the show notes or whatever. But oh yeah, a really good place to start if you just want to get a better understanding is YouTube.
And we work in an environment where people can do sort of a half an hour course at the weekend and suddenly think they're an expert in something. I guess the nice thing with this is that it's highly unlikely that you're ever going to do any harm having read or make decisions based on something that you experienced with astrology. But at the same time, as you said, you can go down full on rabbit holes. Is there a way of understanding, okay, this person knows what they're talking about versus this person has actually just read a horoscope in a paper and is just trying to create clickbait?
Yeah, and actually, I think when we're in reading our own chart, I don't think we can do any harm. But I think actually reading someone else's chart for someone, there is potential of that, because I remember a reading that I had, and the person said to me that because I had Saturn in Capricorn, and Saturn was, everything takes a little bit longer, and Capricorn is the same, and it was in my house of every day, that I wouldn't make much money for a long time. And actually I found that really disheartening. And so I always try to do my readings really future focused. I don't talk about people's shadows too much unless they want to. I like to look at the gifts and the opportunities more. But I think for me, because a lot of people are talking about astrology, you can, on Instagram and stuff. I would kind of, to know whether they do know what they're talking about, I would look for if they've been writing blogs and things as well. And, those kind of things to look, because it's very hard to tell. One thing I will say to people, and I love AI, but do not ask chat about your birth chart, because it gets it wrong, but it does it in a very, very clever way. But if you didn't know,
Yeah,
you wouldn't know it was wrong. So
but that's it. You can't question
yeah,
it, can you? Because the whole
no,
point is you don't know it to begin with. So
yeah. So yeah, that's one
avoid
thing.
that for now.
Yes,
Yeah.
but for now, but I'm sure give it another 6 months, I'll probably be out of a job, because you'll be able to think about details in there and it will tell you everything. But
You say that, but I think with any of these things, there needs to be a bit of a human interpretation element, doesn't there? Because ultimately AI is it's only able to send out what it's had, the information it's had put in, and it can't know the person or the person's situation.
yeah,
So,
and I think that's the best part of my job is actually when we talk about a placement and something and asking, well, how does that look for you? And actually understanding together and having that conversation of, well, yeah, actually, I do that, or no, I don't. And then we can kind of like talk more about it. And sometimes, it can bring things up for people, which again is why I think actually making sure that you pick the right astrologer is important, because can they hold the space for you? Can they hold your emotions if they do come up?
And people can often turn to these things at a time when they're quite vulnerable, can't they? So again,
Yes,
that's
definitely.
that human element can be really, really important to bring in that compassion as well as looking at opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you're right. When they first come to astrology, it's usually wanting to understand. A lot of people come with the question like, what is my purpose? Or, feeling quite lost with life. So, and again, that's a heavy conversation. Sometimes actually, I think part of being a good astrologer is sometimes telling people what they don't want to hear, in the sense of, I had to do a reading for someone the other day and they were putting off, they want launching something. And I had to say, this is the window. And if you don't do this within the next 3 months, this window closes. And yes, you can still launch after that. But when the planets are in your favor right now, that's not going to be there. So, sometimes you do have to kind of push, but I always am, like I said, I'll never be like, oh, you've got Mars in this sign, you're going to be never going to be successful, whatever that looks like. It'll be like, well, what gifts are in there?
Yes, exactly. And I guess it's all sort of working through that, isn't it? It's like this might not be appropriate at this particular time, but actually what is. I mean, even to the point of if you're doing things on Zoom or in person, picking up on people's facial expressions, and they might be just nodding along, going, okay, okay, okay. But unless you have that relationship that you build with the person and the trust that you build with the person, then they can say, well, actually, that doesn't really fit. And you can explore it a little bit more. Well, how about we look at it in this way? Does
Yeah.
that fit? The other area where I felt I tipped my toe in, if you like, is I got one of those moon journals. And actually, I found that quite interesting because it wasn't so much that I was like, oh, okay, it's going to be whatever moon in that month or in that season. And therefore, I have to be doing this, or I must look at things in this way. But it was a way of directing my attention to different things as the year went through. And that was quite nice as a framework. Whether you believed wherever the moons were or whatever, it was quite a nice, gentle way of having a framework of looking at different things through the year. And it did feel energetically like that worked. So even though that's on a very sort of universal platform, it wasn't taking any of my birth chart or anything into consideration. It can be quite handy even just to sort of dip your toe in that sense.
Yeah, I think absolutely. And that I think, like, I would say to anyone, even if they don't believe in astrology or whatever, kind of though journaling around the full moon and using the moons as kind of a framework, make you think about things that you wouldn't necessarily think about, like, where are you overgiving in this area of life? And I think anything that helps us slow down and reflect is it, whether that is that you believe, that's the moon doing that or whatever. I think it is great for us. And it is very, how often do we sit and we ask ourselves these questions? What do I actually want this month? Or what do I need to do this
Yeah.
month to move towards getting what I want? And I just only think that can be a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really about taking that potential, but then taking responsibility yourself
Yeah.
for what that potential becomes.
Yeah, because we have free will. We can choose to follow what the moons and all the planets are backing us to do that month, or we don't. So, but I think regardless, have that time and have that reflection is helpful for anyone.
Yeah. Is there anything else that just sticks out in terms of you've approached something differently because you've used your astrology knowledge, or you've done something that you might not have done?
I would say really understanding my birth chart and how complex and layered that is has really helped me have so much more compassion and patience for other people. Because when I started to understand how layered I was, I'm like, which I knew anyway, but seeing, when understanding, oh, I do this like this, like I just was able to have, let's take my partner, for example. I'm like, why are you moving so slowly all the time? Like, why are you, when he's built, like, when we build anything from IKEA, it's like, I'm like, rip the box open, stuff everywhere, don't look at the instructions.
That was me yesterday.
Yeah, he's laying it all out, counting the pieces, reading the instructions, I'm like, oh my God, get on with it. But then when I see, oh, he's got really strong Virgo placements and really strong Capricorn placements, it just helps me go, that makes sense why you do that. Because for a long time, one thing I really struggled with was why everyone didn't think like me. And I couldn't understand why other people didn't. And I know that sounds really selfish, I guess, but I couldn't.
It's so true,
Yeah.
isn't it? We see the world through our own eyes,
Yeah.
and we assume that's the way the world is, but actually all of us are looking at it in a slightly different way due to a myriad of things, whether that's personal experiences or whether it is their birth chart or whether it's their human design, or there's all sorts of, as you said, layered versions that are the way we interpret the world, and then the way that we communicate with other people and the way that we interact with other things.
Yes, I think that was one of the main things, was just gave me compassion for, more patience with others, which sounds wild that astrology was able to do that. But I think it was just seeing my chart and seeing all the layers to it. And I'm like, there's literally a word for this, and it's called sonder. And it's like the sudden realization that everyone else is living a life as complex as you. Because I think we really have this tendency to think that we are the main character and everyone else is like extras, but actually remembering that everyone is the main character in their life, and they have as many like complexities and stuff as we have, gives you just that little bit, you go into the shop, someone's a bit grumpy, and you can have that a bit more, I guess, compassion there for, what's going on for them, rather than, God, they're miserable, So
I love that you've brought that up and that you've related it to astrology, because I think that's so important at the moment, that we have that ability to have compassion and understanding that other people are going through other things. And as you say, it's okay that you're your own priority, but actually it doesn't stop you from appreciating other people.
Yeah, and I think with all the psychotherapy work, I had a real understanding for that anyway. Astrology gave me a real sense of we are a collective that I didn't get from maybe the psychotherapy. So understanding, yes, I have my individual chart, but it's fitting in with other people's on a more collective scale was kind of where I really leaned into that more.
Yeah. And I guess people would think of, again, from a playful, fun perspective, think of linking their horoscopes when they're going into relationships and things like that. Or as you say, when you're a teenager and sort of looking at, oh, which horoscope is this person going to be a match for me? Because will the horoscopes match? From what you've said with houses and things, presumably then there is potential for certain signs to match, or is that just, again, something that's for entertainment purposes?
Yeah, so they'll call it like synastry when they'll compare two charts together, and see how they fit. And if you looked at mine and my partner's chart together, you'd be like, they should not be together. So there's like proof that, you know, we can have these conflicts in our chart. But again, it's how do we use that? How do we make this work? Which is like any relationship, really. But there are lots of astrologers out there that do like relationship astrology. And I would never my thing wouldn't ever be, oh, don't date this person because they're a Sagittarius or whatever. But yes, that you can really use your charts and see how you're going to work together as a couple.
Yeah.
For business partners, I always look at my clients' charts before I read for them, or before, if I'm working with a client one-to-one on a long scale, I will look and see how are we going to work together.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
But I guess there's that element of, as much as it might identify harmony versus sort of conflict, actually you sort of need a bit of both to keep relationships interesting anyway, don't you?
I think so. Yeah, you wouldn't. Yeah, I think, and I think that's how you grow together, right? Like going through stuff, and then how do you work it out and potentially come out the other side stronger? So yeah, I definitely think you need that.
Yeah, I guess that comes back to that point of sort of appreciating how other people might be different and how can we work with that rather than against it.
Yeah, and that is that's something I still, you know, even though I said to you that I have that real compassion now, I still need to check myself on daily, because especially with kind of like social media and stuff, and you see lots of people's opinions, and you know, it's like, oh, how can you think like that, or how can you not care about the fact that that's happening in this part of the world? And so I still quite often have to like come back in and check myself on that, for sure.
Yeah. So I, as you very well know, I booked a session with you a couple of days ago. I basically use my podcast as a shopping to shop before I actually booked one before we even did the session, which was absolutely fascinating. And I'm still sort of processing some of the things that came up. So if other people are also interested in doing something like that, could you just, I will obviously put things in the show notes, but could you just give us a rundown of what sort of things that you've got on offer at the moment?
Yeah, so I do just on the astrology alone, astrology readings, and there's a couple of different types that people can have. So there's a birth chart, you know, a basic birth chart reading, and then there's the make it make sense, which is what you had. We've mixed yours up a little bit, but that's to kind of like understand what's going on at the moment, and then people can come around their birthday and see and have a solar return and see what's going to come up for them for the year as well. Basically, if they want them to understand more about astrology, it's very much what they need to know at that point. Me using my intuition with because we've got an hour, we haven't got long to talk about it. And then the other part of my work is to help women break away from that good girl conditioning and people pleasing and stuff. And that's kind of long-term work. I'm on Insta at moonandsoul_coach.
Amazing. I'll make sure that all of that is in the show notes. I know for me, the motivation was that this is a year of a lot of things changing. So wanting to sort of understand through an astrological lens what could be sort of coming up from that perspective. So
yeah, and it was a perfect example. We were talking about stuff in your chart, and then you said to me, well, actually, I've been thinking about doing this. And it wasn't quite what we had said, was it? But it fitted in so, and actually that was the importance of having that conversation.
Yeah, well, I highly recommend it. Look out for Soph on Instagram. The link's in the show notes. Thank you so much for today, Soph. I found that really fascinating. So much to it. So.
Yeah, thank you so much.
What I loved about that conversation is that Soph came to astrology through logic. She needed proof before she could lean in. And yet the moment she found it, it completely changed how she understands herself, other people, and her place in the world. The word sonder has stayed with me since we spoke. that sudden realization that everyone around you is living a life as rich and complex as your own, that everyone is the main character of their own story. It sounds simple, but actually it's quite profound, and I love that astrology gave Soph that. Not just a framework for understanding herself, but a doorway into genuine compassion for other people. The birth chart as a map of opportunities rather than a fixed personality label feels important too. It's not you're a Scorpio and this is what you're like and you will be forever. It's more like, here are your gifts, here are the patterns you carry, here are the moments where life is asking you to rest, and here are the ones where planets are genuinely in your corner. That feels a long way from a horoscope column in a magazine. And Soph's daughter Callie is now through her treatment and well. I just had to say that because after everything Soph shared, I'm sure you'll want to know. You can find Soph on Instagram, and if you'd like a reading of your own, whether it's a birth chart reading, a make it make sense session like I had, or a solar return reading around your birthday, all the links are in the show notes. Until next time, take care of yourselves, and remember, you were born with a map. Might be worth having a look at it.